Peace, family. Peace. Peace and elevation, family. It's your brother Mike X. Welcome to another clip from my YouTube channel, BruthaMikeXSpeaks. I ask you to please subscribe to my channel. Please share this message. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to tell you what to think, as they say. I'm just asking that you take greater responsibility for your own thoughts. You know what I mean? To open your mind, to commit yourself towards being a lifelong learner. You know what I mean? As it is said, the truth will make you free. You know what I mean? The truth, seeking truth, remaining open-minded, giving yourself the permission and the advantage of looking at things not just from one narrow-minded perspective, closed-minded perspective, or bigoted or prejudiced perspective, but remaining open to look at it from all sides. You know what I mean? It will give you a greater opportunity to see something or to see things for what they really are, and will give you the benefit to make better choices, to commit yourself to taking steps and committing to actions that will personally benefit you, and those that you care about, minus you locking yourself into a particular way of viewing something that benefits everyone but you. And that's where we find ourselves a lot of times in Black America, you know what I mean, particularly. But in general, other races and ethnicities, a lot of times they see things just as screwed up or narrow-minded or bigoted or prejudiced as well, you know what I mean? And in this way, instead of us being able to move forward in society, to become more equitable, to become more just and collaborative, across, the different barriers, that have been presented to us a lot of times on why we can't come together. We remain a divided humanity a lot of times along the lines of race and gender and age, and geographic location where you may presently live, or geographic location of where you may have been born, and you become prejudiced or you become bigoted towards the other side, and you become, again, prejudiced or bigoted towards a particular way of looking at things that prevents you from collaborating with the so-called enemy, because the other person, the so-called enemy, thinks different than you or looks at things different than you according to a particular, again, bigoted, narrow-minded way of practicing things. I ask you to open up your mind, A month before Malcolm X was assassinated, he was being interviewed by a woman from a New York newspaper called The Village Voice. I don't know if The Village Voice is still in existence, to be honest with you. I know that it was still in existence, in the early 2000s. But anyway, he was being interviewed a month before he was assassinated. Sometime in January of 1965, he was being interviewed by this lady. And one of the things he said in that interview, those who are more familiar with the life and legacy of Malcolm, this will probably ring a bell, but it has always stuck with me, this particular quote from this interview, amongst the many hundreds of quotes that, I have learned from and grown from and tried to apply, as a son, a spiritual son of Malcolm, the man whose legacy and whose example, provided me with a father figure, to impact my entire adult life. Up until that point, I was ignorant in New York City, and I was practicing the life of someone, of a black man, of a young black man who didn't know what life was about, up until that point. You know what I mean? So I always loved Malcolm. So anyway, he said in this interview, to quote, "Our biggest mistake has been," talking about the black movement up until that time, "our biggest mistake has been to strive to organize a sleeping people around specific goals." He said, first you have to wake them up and then you'll get some action. And the lady who was interviewing him asked him, wake them up to what? To their oppression? And he said, no, wake them up to their own human dignity, to their own self-worth. Now, there's a lot to unpack in that quote. That quote is so powerful, and it gives us a lot to focus on and analyze and build upon. The first part of the quote, "Our biggest mistake has been to strive to organize a sleeping people around specific goals." Amongst us, we've had many different leaders, and people who were concerned with our plight as black people. And some of them had political solutions. Some of them had economic solutions. Some of them had religious solutions. You know what I mean? Some of them even had educational solutions. And what would happen a lot of times is they would advocate that we had to do this specific thing. We had to become Christians, or we had to become Muslims, or we had to see ourselves as Africans, or we had to see ourselves as, Negroes or Black Americans, or we had to see ourselves as Moors or Moorish. You know what I mean? We had to see ourselves as, all of these different things. We had to focus more on our education, or we had to focus more on our economics, and all of these different angles or perspectives we would use to the detriment of realizing that we had to focus on all of those things at the same time, and what was needed, instead of us fighting over our different perspectives, each group or each faction should represent or extol the principles of their particular outlook, and those who saw it the same way that that group saw it, they should focus on actually doing the work, that their perspective led them to believe was the right angle to focus on. You know what I mean? Instead of, like for instance, if you believe that education is the biggest solution that we needed to focus on, then practice providing that education. Practice on being true to what your perspective of education being the biggest thing that we need to focus on, then work to create those opportunities educationally. You know what I mean? But remain open to those who believed that we needed to focus on having a greater say-so over our politics and the policies that would be enacted in the communities where we actually lived. You know what I mean? Focus on the politics. If that's what you believe is an essential part of what we need to master in our communities, then focus on providing sound political advice and counsel and understanding, But the worst thing was to strive to, if you believed that your particular religious background, the church or the mosque, provided individuals with a strong inclination to gain a more moral or spiritual perspective that was needed to lead our people away from participating in their own degradation, in their own self-hatred, and participating in habits and addictions that led to, promiscuity and lust and hatred, and slander and gossiping and crabs in the barrel, parasitical practices that kept us divided and kept us, as crabs in the barrel, so to speak. Then practice your particular outlook and become excellent in it. Become a master in it. Show and prove the fruits that are available to the sincere individual who is committed to practicing that particular religion or that particular cultural or spiritual perspective. You know what I mean? Instead of being more focused on practicing a conditional unity, like we could improve our lives if y'all would stop being Christians, or we could improve the way things are going in our community if y'all would just stop being Muslims and come over to our side, And a lot of times we were more focused on the propaganda of being a particular, so-called subscriber to a religious point of view or a political point of view, that we never got to practice or connect ourselves or align with the power that can be found in all of those different perspectives, and pathways of consciousness, that called for a sincerity of commitment and belief to practicing that particular way of looking at things. I hope that I'm being clear. So when Malcolm was saying our biggest mistake has been to strive to organize a sleeping people around specific goals, he was saying that we've spent enough time fighting each other, you know, over our differences, and that we needed to strive to, number one, be sincere and committed, and to show and prove the value of whatever it was that we said we believed in. You know what I mean? By having a level of integrity and sincerity in our commitment to being, you know, Muslim or Christian or 5%er or Moorish, or whatever it was that you said that you believed in, you know, that you should show and prove how valuable those particular ways of life have been to you as an individual, that has allowed you to move on from just being caught up, you know, in the conditions and conditioning that you was caught up in before you was awakened, you know, to whatever particular thing that you was advocating. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, you know, again, we weren't focused on aligning with the power of the particular thing we advocated, you know? So a lot of times, you know, it's like it says in the scripture, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. Having a form of powerlessness, you know, looking the part, sounding the part, acting, you know, but denying the power of the practice, you know. And a lot of times, look, you know, being in a just as bad or worse position than the ones who you might have looked down on as ignorant or immoral, you know, being hypocritical, being insincere, you know, practicing symbolic gestures, you know, what they call it today, they call it virtue signaling, you know, being more, you know, about, you know, well, we all believe the same thing, so we're better off than those who don't believe what we believe. That's what's keeping the community fractured and divided, you know. And then the ones that we say we care about, that we want to awaken, instead of us being sincere advocates or apostles or representatives of our particular cultural, spiritual, political belief system, we do untold damage to those belief systems. And those who are looking at those so-called representatives of those belief systems say things like, yo, if that's what it means to be a Christian, I don't want no parts of being a so-called Christian. Or that person, as hypocritical, as insincere, as untrustworthy as I know that person to be, if that's what it means to be a Muslim, I don't want no parts of that Islam that they advocating, and so on and so forth. You know, a lot of times, you know, we do untold damage and harm to some of these belief systems that have been shown to bring power to the individual who is sincerely committed to acting out that particular belief system. I know many sincere Christians, you know, whose practice, sincere and committed practice, to committing themselves to living a life of spiritual focus, you know, through the lens of the principles of what it means to be a follower of Christ, has allowed them to move on from being addicted to drugs or addicted to promiscuity, you know what I mean? Or being, you know, a criminal or committing themselves to crime, you know, and visiting hurt and harm upon others for their own selfish ambitions. I know committed and have met committed Muslims who have moved on from those lowly levels of self-hatred and harm and trauma bonding and misery loves company, you know, and worldly conformity, carnal living, so to speak. They've moved on and through their commitment to their particular faith and wanting to be seen and wanting as a sincere follower of Islam or being a Muslim. You know, I've met and I know individuals who are committed to being and living out the culture of our self-Lord and Master, or being a 5%er, you know, and they take their lessons and they take it seriously, you know. They're not just virtue signaling. They're not just trying to put on a pin or a cross or a star and crescent or a fez or a kufi. They're not just trying to look the part. They're striving to be the part. They're striving to attach themselves to the power of being disciplined, of being responsible, you know. I hope that I'm making sense. So they're not committed to striving to awaken a sleeping people to a specific way of life. It's not about their commitment to awakening. It's about their commitment to living and being responsible and being committed. You know what I mean? Along those lines. And I love that. I love the fact that we don't all have to be the same thing. We don't all have to look at things the same way. As a matter of fact, the more ways, the more perspectives that we can bring to some of the conditions and conditioning that we've been forced to live under, the greater possibilities we have to collaborate amongst one another and share the respect, share the power that we've been given or that we've practiced as being committed to our particular perspectives. You know, standing in our truth or standing in your truth allows you to have something worthwhile to offer, more than just judging and ridiculing and shaming You know what I mean? And this is a large topic, you know, so I'm already up to 25 minutes, man. Let me see if I can speed this up a little bit. So again, our biggest mistake in the past has been to strive to organize a sleeping people around specific goals. You know, live out your culture. Live out your political practice. You know, be a sincere representative for what you're advocating. But by the same token, learn how to respect the other person's perspective and point of view. And look for opportunities to collaborate instead of looking for opportunities to fight and argue and shame. You know, people who live in the same areas a lot of times and have the same concerns, but have a different particular outlook. You know, that could be advantageous if you would open yourself up to it. Okay. So, wake them up to what? You know, our biggest mistake in the past has been to strive to organize a sleeping people around specific goals. First, you have to wake them up, and then you'll get some action. Wake them up to what? To their oppression? Our people don't need to be awakened to the different ways that we have been oppressed and that we are still being oppressed. You know what I mean? Our people know full well that being black in America, you know, has led, especially in the inner cities, in the projects, in the ghettos, has led to a victimization and oppression that is based upon us being black in America. You know what I mean? Like the old saying says, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. But if you're black, get the hell back. You know what I mean? When we look at our neighborhoods, particularly in the inner cities, particularly in the projects, you know, and we see that everybody else owns and controls our neighborhoods. 99.9% of the businesses are owned by outsiders, selling us all types of alcohol and devitalized foods. You know, the chicken spots and the Chinese stores. You know what I mean? The liquor stores. You know, all of these different. And a lot of times, you know, the people who own these stores are people of other races and other cultures and other ethnicities. You know, the people who own the buildings that we are forced to rent, you know, are people who don't live in the community, you know. And a lot of times, you know, we don't have an opportunity, or we don't have the opportunities to have greater vested interests and ownership, you know, in the communities that we suffer in. You know what I mean? And we strive to raise our children in without access to the resources that come when you are able to control the economy of your community or have greater say-so in the economics and the politics, you know, that are practiced in the community that you grew up in and live in. So a lot of times, man, we try to raise in the schools. You have no control in the schools that you have to send your children to under the threat of fine or imprisonment, you know, if you don't comply. So a lot of times we watch our precious children grow up and start off, you know, so bubbly and loving and innocent, as babies come into this world. And we see our children go from having great love for learning to turning disinterested and cold and embittered, and then dropping out, and then pursuing street activities, illegal activities. And next thing you know, your cute and cuddly and precious baby went from a loving individual to now being hard-hearted and bitter, towards their peers and towards the adult population, for not protecting them and showing them love and showing them how to get along and do for themselves better in a world, in a society that doesn't want to see us prosper. So anyway, our people know that we've been oppressed. Our people know that we are still being oppressed. So we don't need to wake our people up to our oppression. Our people know that they've been oppressed. What our people don't know a lot of times is that their lives are precious in the sight of the Most High God, the Creator. That their lives are precious and have to be precious in their own lives. They have to begin to believe in themselves again. Wake them up to what? To their oppression? No, to their own human dignity, to their own self-worth. We need to wake our people up to their own human dignity, to their own self-worth, so that they begin to believe that Black lives truly do matter. We don't need a movement that's focused on trying to prove to other people that Black lives matter. So you commit all your energy to vociferously screaming out, Black lives matter, treat us better. We need to prove to ourselves that Black lives matter. And we need to focus on practicing specific habits, specific actions and thoughts and meditation and dialogue amongst one another, showing and proving that Black lives matter to ourselves. Like Michael Jackson said, I'm talking to the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to make a change. You know what I mean? And no lesson could be any clearer. If you want to make the Black community a better place, just look at yourself and make a change. That's the type of focus that we need from individuals in the many different projects and ghettos and poverty-stricken communities or neighborhoods that we live in the different places that we are merely existing in. We need individuals who will begin to practice those things in their own lives. We need individuals who will use these spiritual, these cultural, these religious, these political, social pathways that we used to be committed to begin to practice a level of healing, a level of regeneration and redemption in their lives as individuals, to show and prove that the truth will make you free. Do you know what I mean? The truth that you're practicing, the truth that you're standing in, will make you free to make better choices, to make better decisions as your consciousness, as your awareness expands and you move on from self-hatred to self-love, to self-respect, to a greater human dignity and self-worth, to where you can begin to overflow these qualities into the lives of your peers. You're not practicing a crabs in the barrel mentality anymore. You're able to appreciate the efforts of those who are striving not only to get out of the barrel that you've all been suffering in, but you're able to appreciate the efforts that are being made by those who escaped to strive to throw the ladder back down, the rope back down, to help you to escape your own self-degradation, your own self-hatred, your own parasitical behaviors that is making the black ghettos and the projects more and more unsafe for the innocence of our children to remain intact, for our seniors and elders to be so afraid to live in these places that they're the first ones to call for the police and others, because they're afraid of their own people. They're afraid of the younger generations. So the lessons that they've learned, the wisdom, the understanding that they have accumulated over a lifetime of living, we get cut off from those lessons because they're afraid to come out into the public and enjoy the type of appreciation and respect that would be given to the elder generations by the younger generations, who know that those elder generations appreciate and love and are sacrificing for the betterment of those younger generations. So I had wrote, I think I've covered basically everything that I had wrote, even though I wasn't really looking at the notes, the talking points that I wanted to talk to you about. I think I pretty much covered it. But for the benefit of this video, I talked about the great ancestor and elder, Malcolm X, Hajj, Malik, Shabazz, my spiritual father. I talked about how we need to move away from the tribalism and conditional unity, that we practice. The conditional unity, the tribalism won't allow us to come together. I'm not against you being Christian. I'm not against you being Muslim. I'm not against you being Moorish or 5%er or whatever. If it makes you a better individual, a more righteous individual, someone who's capable of practicing self-love, so that you are not threatened by other people practicing self-love, by all means, be whatever makes you the best person, be that. You know what I mean? But give to others what you want. If you want love, then practice love and be willing to give love. If you want respect, then practice self-respect and be willing to give respect. You know what I mean? So we move away from the tribalism. We move away, from conditional unity to what is known as principled unity. You know, principled unity. Giving, you know, love. That's a principle. Practicing self-love. Practicing respect for the life that you've been given. For the role in the community that you know needs to be played and respected so that we can begin to heal these communities. You know what I mean? I talked about greater individual responsibility to heal, to become more responsible for your own thoughts and actions, and to commit yourself towards practicing righteousness. Don't wait for the change to occur outside of you. You know, oh, we could make a better community if y'all would just wake up. No, practice what an awakened life looks like. Align yourself with the power of discipline to get your affairs in order, first as an individual. Take greater control over your physical life, your mental awareness and consciousness, your ability to control your emotions, and be a source of encouragement and inspiration instead of being irascible, easily angered, hot-tempered, you know, and a source of, you know, unnecessary arguments all the time. Practice being a beacon of hope, a beacon of light, you know, according to whatever the belief system that you say you believe in allows you the power to practice. Anyway, family, I hope that I hit the points that I wanted to. I'm going to listen to this myself before I upload this to YouTube. So if you see that this was uploaded to YouTube, I found, you know, it to be, at least from my point of view, something that can help share some level of light that the family, that the community, that the individual can use to make more sense out of their walk. And as these individuals begin to practice these principles, the light that they shed in the various communities where our people have been suffering, we can begin to see a change, a real change, you know, moving forward into the future. You know, the last thing I'll say is this is more important than your commitment or your dependency, I should say, on choosing the lesser of two evils. You know what I mean? This gives you a way out. The practice of righteousness, the practice of gaining greater control over your life, of practicing a healing and regeneration and redemption and self-empowerment. This gives you a greater option to exercise a level of power to where you will be less dependent on choosing between the lesser of two evils. All right, family. I'll talk to you again soon. Peace and elevation.